G'day, welcome back to Love This Ride. I'm Gary Warren. Well look, I know this series is normally all about road cars, but today we're doing something a little bit different. Caught up with an old friend of mine, John English, and we're having a look at his race car. It's a Pontiac Firebird Trans Am. We'll talk more about that. How about we go find John and we'll talk some more from there. G'day, welcome back to Love This Ride. We're here with John English and have a look at this. It's the Pontiac Firebird. But John, this is not your first race car.
No, it's not, Gary. I hasten to say that I started my motor racing career, for the want of a better word, in 1970 at Lakeside in a V6 Capri in March 1970.
That is going back a very long way.
That's 50 and a half years ago.
Yes.
Yeah, I know I look young, but...
A Capri, that's not exactly especially in 1970, that's a little bit of a strange choice of car. What prompted that?
I guess I wanted something different to be a bit of a standout, and I had a choice between a GTR Tirana or a 320 Monaro. I looked at both at length, and I thought, well, the V6 Capri, nobody's running it. I love the shape of the car, and I thought 2 to 3 litre could do well in that class. And as luck would have it, everywhere I went with the car, and I raced at Lakeside Surface, Warren Park, Warwick Farm, and so on, and Amaroo. We broke the 2 to 3 litre lap record everywhere we went. So it helped in creating a bit of a step up for me very quickly.
So I was going to say, for a long time, as I remember you racing, particularly in the 1980s at Lakeside and Surfers Paradise in the sports event, you've always had a lot of dealer support. Is that the sort of thing that helped open the door, having those class records?
Yes, it did. I lived in Sydney back in those days, but I was doing a job in Mount Morgan, so I was living in Rockhampton, hence why I had the first race at Lakeside. We drove down, did the event, went back to Rockhampton. But eventually I went back to Sydney, and after a couple of years of being back there and running Amaroo and Oran Park and so on, I decided it was time to get married, so therefore the race car had to go. Got married. With my new bride, moved up to Queensland in '73, and I was fortunate to know a guy named Stuart Winch, and he had a speed equipment shop in Wellington Road, East Brisbane, and he said that I'd like to promote my business by going motor racing. Would you be interested in driving? And it took me that long to say, oh, okay.
As long as that, John?
Yes. And Stuart bought a Twin Cam Escort, which is the purple car painted peak performance colours. We ran very successfully with that for a couple of years. Then we progressed to a Mark 1 RS2000. Ford Motor Company approached us and they did a deal with then Coastcraft Ford, and they put us into a Mark 2 RS2000 rubber nose twin headlight job.
Now, I was going to say, I'll jump in very quickly there. There was a group of those were imported specifically by Ford for motor racing. Was that actually one of those cars?
It was, yeah. It was one of the 25. And so was the first Mark 1. That was one of the 25 they originally imported, and then they upgraded to the new shape. So we were very fortunate. Sponsored by, well, we got help from Ford Motor Company, TAA, Castrol. You thought, this is easy, why isn't everybody doing it? And we were just getting so much support to the stage where we took the car to Bathurst in '76, and my co-driver then was Gary Scott, and it was Gary's first trip to the mountain. Of course, years later he put the Nissan on pole, right? So, but yeah,
so does he still thank you for that?
Every day, rings me all the time. But yeah, no, it was a good period of my life, and we just went on from strength to strength. I guess I was very fortunate in that I was being supported by people, because I was freshly married, baby on the way, didn't have any money, typical young bloke, because I would have been, I think I was only 25, 26 back in those days. So to have that support allowed me to continue motor racing, which was my passion.
My first memory of seeing you race at Lakeside was in the Escort Sports event with Ian Corness.
Yep.
In the Brian Burt Ford cars.
Blue and white cars, yeah.
But then you had the XD Falcons. So through the early 80s, it was a string of very fast boys, the Escorts, the Falcons. Then of course the arrival of Group A. You had to take pretty much a year off then. And then it was, you became a little bit of a journeyman in terms of what you were driving.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the Group A era, I bought the very car that put me into the Lord of Bathurst, and turned it into a sports sedan that had a fiberglass bonnet and a wing, other than it was a Group C car. And we won the championship in that car. And because of connections we had, I was invited by Charlie O'Brien to join him in the bumper-to-bumper BMW for Bathurst in '85. And then the next year we continued with the Mazda, supported by Kima in those days. And we ran the same car in '86, but painted it white, with a mate of mine from New Zealand named McIntyre. And yeah, so again, I was fortunate to get the opportunity to drive cars, and just people said, would you like to drive this car? So, yeah.
But as I say, if we go through the cars of the 80s and early 90s, I mean, it really was a roll call of the privateer class cars. You had the BMW. I believe was there a run in a Sierra at one point?
Yeah, that was 1991.
And I believe that was quite an experience.
Yeah, it was. It's like driving a slingshot. It was an amazing car. You know, for those that can relate, a car with a very heavy camshaft, you get up to about $4 or $5 grand, and suddenly it just goes shoom. Well, the Sierra was like that. You drive the car moderately under $4 grand, 4.5. As soon as you got to a certain rev, the thing would kick in, and just the turbo kick in, just unbelievable acceleration. So, it's an interesting car to drive. It's like driving a high-powered motorcycle. You know, it's got nothing in something. Front wheel lifts off the ground and you're off. That was I only ever drove the Sierra once, and that was at Bathurst. I don't think from memory did testing up to Bathurst. We went to Bathurst, raced the car, came home, and a guy by the name of John Holmes owned the car out of Toowoomba, and I believe the car is still sitting in his shed. I drove with Terry Finnegan in '89 at Bathurst. I then drove with Wayne Park in 1990 at Bathurst. Then we had the year in '91 with the Sierra, and in '92, '3 and '4 I got back into comedy around in '90. A couple of different drivers, a guy from New Zealand, Brett Hilton from Victoria, and I drove together 1 year, and we had a good time. We had a shocking accident in '92 or '3, I think it was. The car was painted black, and we had sponsorship from a fast food company down in Melbourne. And my co-driver, who was a Kiwi touring car champion, Ed Lamont. Ed didn't want to get, it was raining that year, Ed didn't want to get in the car, and the owner of the car said, Ed, John's been driving for 2.5 hours, you have to get in or you'll be excluded, the car will be excluded. So Ed begrudgingly got in the car, going down the hill, was sitting on, let's say 80k. Terry Bosenjak was in one of the Caltech Sierras and hit our car at full noise just before you go into the kick, which destroyed the Commodore, destroyed the Sierra, and I think Ed had done 2 laps at that stage. So his fear of getting it was justified, and it became a sticky end.
You're one of the few remaining drivers who can actually talk about the pre and post chase era. What was it like in the old days?
Oh, mate, with the Falcon, and I relate the Falcon to it, because that was probably the most powerful car pre-chase that I've driven there. As you came down the hill, there were 2 bumps, and the last one was fairly severe. If you didn't take your foot off the throttle, it would just rev as harder, because the rear wheels would come off the ground about that far. And so you had to be mindful of, I'm coming to the second up, I'll lift off a bit and then accelerate again to the braking mark. So we were doing, in those days, wow, I don't know, 290k down the hill without the benefit of having the chase to slow down. And then you'd go from flat out down the hill to picking a braking mark at a turn left to go past pit straight.
And that was what, usually about halfway down Conrod for most people?
No, we had pretty good brakes in those days. Yeah, they're always a challenge to pull up because you're going so fast, and after a while, speed, I guess you're aware of how fast you're going, but it's not that terrifying. When you first get in the car at Bathurst on the Thursday, and you do your first laps, even though you've done it a few years before, those first 2 laps down the hill, you think, holy hell. But again, it all becomes relevant.
Now, if we look at your racing career, it could almost be summed up as an alphabet of racing. You've done Group A, you've done Group C, you've done Group N. I won't ask if you did Appendix J because that's probably a drive in there somewhere.
Yeah, I think so, back in the day.
And now these days, you're driving a TA.
Back to the, yeah, amazing.
So, John, first of all, what is Trans Am? For those people that haven't had a chance to get out and see it as yet, and obviously this year has been a real washout in terms of getting to the racetrack. What is Trans Am?
Trans Am is meant to replicate the American series of the 70s, and our cars are put together in that we've got a group of regulations, and you're only allowed to have X amount done to the heads and so on. So there's a very strict group of regs. There's a weight the car has to be when it finishes a race. They only rev the 350 engine cars, so the 6 litre cars run to 7,000 RPM, the 5 litre cars run to 7.5. The 5 litre cars are lighter, they're 1320 with driver. The 6 litre cars are 1450 with driver. So what we try to do is make the cars match reasonably well. And a lot of times a 5 litre car will give a 6 litre car a bit of a carry, particularly in the wet. But it's a great category. I mean, it's cost effective. I believe it's one of the cheapest forms of motor racing in Australia. It's good fun, tons of horsepower, cross-bar tyres, you have a lot of fun with. And I guess for me, starting to talk about retirement at some stage, this is a great category to leave the sport on, if indeed I do.
Now, I was going to say, you've actually been instrumental in the creation of the Trans Am category, if I'm correct.
It was going before I started, but we've taken it. My key management guy with me is Ian Palmer. Ian and I run Trans Am. There have been different people in and out, but Ian and I have been there for a while. And we'd say to anybody, if you want to have fun, and there are cars that have been built now by Peter Shortridge from Plainlands, and there's a number of guys coming into building brand new cars just to run in this category. It's just great fun. And you get to run at Queensland Raceway and our favourite love, Lakeside. Because the cars are logbooked, Motorsport Australia, you can take your car and run in other states as a CAMS logbook car, but you run as a sports sedan because that's what we're logbook does.
You've always got very strong fields.
When COVID lifts a bit and people can travel again, we'll have fields up to 20 cars.
But I was going to say, when in the past, I mean, one of the things I've enjoyed about it is watching people, like the spectators, actually relate to the cars. So they see the cars as cars that they've recognised and gone, hey, yeah, this is actually, I know this car.
Yeah, and I mean, we're probably a little bit biased. We like to think that when the Trans Am cars come into the race, that all the crowd comes to the fence to watch. And it's pretty much true. A lot of people come and have a look at the Trans Am cars. Now,
I was going to say that the eligible years is actually, there's quite a spread. It's not just a 1 or 2 year period either. I believe there's about a 7 or 8 years.
64 to 72. 64 to 72. So, my car, I think this is 72, 71, whatever. But, there's guys running 65, 66 Mustangs and the whole range of things you can get your head into.
Are there any Australian cars able to run, or is it all
It's all two-door muscle cars. And because that's what Trans Am represented. There was talk a few years ago about, why don't you bring in Monaros and why don't you let this car run, that car run?
The cars are generally fairly under stress when it comes to racing.
Very reliable cars. I mean, we've done 2 seasons in this car without it being touched, as in pulling apart gearboxes, motors, diffs, etc. So we'd service the car after every race, pretty naturally, but a full service as you pull down and a refresh every 2 years. And that's pretty economical as well.
And I believe it's, again, we have to wait till post-COVID now, but you've actually exported these cars to New Zealand for racing.
Yeah, we went over there for, I think, 4 or 5 years in a row. We'd take 8 cars, put them in containers and run to Hampton Downs, which is about 60k south of Auckland, and we'd race with historic muscle cars over there, HMC, which is New Zealand's equivalent. They run with the same tyres, same size wheel. They've got more horsepower and they're a little bit heavier. But, you know, we managed to acquit ourselves fairly well. The first time we were over, I drove a Camaro similar to this car, and we put it on pole, which the Kiwis were a little bit aghast at. We had their Australians come here and put one of your cars on pole on our track. But yeah, we've always had fun over there. Great bunch of people. We've made some lifelong friends that are going over there, so it's been great.
And in return, I believe you've been able to bring some New Zealand cars over to race here in Australia for a bit of a two-way series.
They've done it over a couple of times. We've raced QR and Lakeside together, and we've then taken the whole group and raced the Car Masters in Sydney at Eastern Creek, Sydney Motorsport Park. Yeah, so Jim Richards said to me in New Zealand, we sat down and had a chat, and he said, you know, if you guys had national television coverage, I'd be in Trans Am like a shot. But because you don't, I have to drive TCM. So he loves the category. He thinks it's because our rules are standard, they haven't changed in 10 years. We keep the rules consistent. So you're not going to get into a category where the following year X amount has been introduced and you've got to spend money on upgrading your car. That doesn't happen.
All right, well, John, we're just about out of time here. I'm going to throw you one last question. Of all those cars, has there been a favourite?
Look, I suppose the car that gave me the most satisfaction was with Dr. Ian Corness building the two Brian Burt Ford Space Frame cars. They were just, well, totally reliable. We won the championship in my car. And they were just such fun cars to drive. We took them to Sydney, took them to Melbourne, and everywhere we went, we managed to be up the front. And I guess the satisfaction of building a car from scratch and then driving it and then having it as a winning car is very satisfying. I got a lot of fun out of that. So I guess from that perspective, the Escorts were my favourite car.
Fantastic. Love this ride. I'm Gary Warren. We'll see you next time.